All right. So welcome to the InPower Coffee Break. We have these every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. And my name is Mary Brody, and I work with Dana Theus at InPower Coaching, and I'm focused on the marketing and user experience. And in this show, we cover women's workplace issues, emotional intelligence at work, corporate culture, and other topics, even expanding out to design thinking, which is what we're having today with Natalie Nixon. It's going to be such a wonderful conversation. Really excited. But basically in this show, we discuss how to survive and thrive in the workplace. So before I introduce our guest and begin our interview, just want to invite you to the conversation. We're going to do a quick interview so you get to know our guest and get the conversation started, and then we'll open it up for discussion. So to introduce Natalie, Natalie is a hybrid thinker. With a background in anthropology and fashion, she comfortably synthesizes the creative and the analytical in design and business to arrive at innovative opportunities. A practitioner and researcher of design thinking, she is a published author, a global speaker, and founding director of the Strategic Design MBA program at Philadelphia University. She is a regular contributor to Inc.com magazine, and her book, Strategic Design Thinking, is available on Amazon. She has been an entrepreneurial hat designer as well as has worked in apparel sourcing for the limited brands in Sri Lanka and Portugal. Natalie's research and consulting interests are in business design, experiential service design, and applying strategies from the fashion industry to a range of sectors to build brand distinction. And at Philadelphia University, she is an associate professor and director of strategic design MBA. In 2014, Natalie was granted the Charles G. Allen Mebane 52 Chair for Design Thinkers. Natalie is a recipient of the 2007 Lindback Distinguished Teaching Award, 2 Philadelphia University Summer Research Grant, and a Lindback Foundation Research Grant. She got her BA from Vassar with a double major in Anthropology and Africana Studies, an MS in Global Textile Marketing from Philadelphia University, and a PhD in Design Management from the University of Westminster in London. And welcome, Natalie. It's so wonderful to have you. I'm really excited about today's discussion.
Thank you so much, and thank you for reading all of that.
Oh, well, it's your background's quite impressive. I also do work in like user experience and customer experience. So I'm like so excited that you're here to talk about design thinking because it's so key to organizations. So that's where I'm like, I see your background and like also with fashion and how it all blends together. Maybe before we get started with our questions, how do you see that all coming together? Because I think your background's amazing. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, one of the things that appealed so much to me about the field of design management and design thinking and design strategy is how integrative it is. I've always been a person who has embraced multidisciplinary studies and very integrative approaches, and I never enjoyed having to choose one over the other. So when I worked on more corporate private sector side of work, I would always get bemused by associates and colleagues and the corporate very kind of condescending to people on the nonprofit and creative economy side, and vice versa. Sometimes when I worked more in the nonprofit sector, my friends and colleagues on the nonprofit side kind of, I think, simplistically would refer to the corporate side as, the man and the power struggle and all that sort of thing. And I don't think it's that black and white. So I've really found my home intellectually and as a practitioner in what the frameworks of design thinking has to offer. So it's been a really nice intersection for me.
Nice. Wonderful. So the first question, kind of maybe to frame up the rest of the discussion, define for us design thinking and what that means.
Well, I like to simply, I hope this is simple, define design thinking as a problem-solving process. And it's one of many tools. People have heard of lean startup, and people have heard of agile. And design thinking is one more tool to help us problem solve in the midst of what are called VUCA environments that are volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And it is a problem-solving process that borrows from the way designers work. So designers who design tangible objects and products, and you take that problem-solving process and you apply it to the intangible. You apply it to the design of services and experiences and processes. And the four things I like to highlight about design thinking are empathy, because you have a very hyper human-centered focus on whatever problem you're trying to solve in marketing or brand strategy or financial operations or logistics. So you start with empathy, which also means we can integrate qualitative research methods, which I love and appreciate. The second principle I like to highlight is lateral thinking. And lateral thinking is that ability to connect the dots between seemingly disparate areas that don't seem to have any obvious connection. And a great example is an essay that was published a few years ago by the physician Atul Gawande. He also is a writer. He writes for the New Yorker. And he wrote a great essay about what hospitals can learn from the Cheesecake Factory restaurant. So his point was, you think about all the chaos that is embedded in the healthcare system right now. If you look in the ER, an emergency room, the left hand doesn't seem to know what the right hand is doing. And his point was, the back of the house of a busy restaurant like Cheesecake Factory manages to, in the midst of their chaos, deliver consistent service delivery every single evening. And maybe there's something that healthcare can learn from hospitality. The third principle is prototyping. Prototypes are rough draft, ugly mock-ups of an idea. And the more corporations can get behind the idea that things don't have to be picture perfect before you start to test it, the better off you'll be from an investment perspective. And the fourth principle of design thinking is story and storytelling. And stories are truth-telling. Stories are the way that we connect as humans with each other. And it's no coincidence that the most innovative brands today have short films that have gone viral on YouTube. So that's design thinking. And that those are the four things I always like to highlight about it.
Yeah, the one that you mentioned, because it's so wonderful to hear this, because I'm behind it all the way, again, doing user experience and customer experience. And the part, though, that I find always fascinating is the empathy. And I'm glad you mentioned it first, because I see it as so key.
Yes.
To understand other people. I don't know if you want to talk more about that and things that you've seen, because even when you were talking about like hospitals and Cheesecake Factory, like at the end it becomes having empathy for your customer and what they're going through, and a little less for the poor me. I'm having these crazy shifts and like all these administrative problems, and it's almost like, focusing on the other.
Yes, well, it's true that at the end of the day, we are selling our products and services to human beings, whether or not it's a B2B business or B2C. And sometimes in the midst of that harriedness and craziness, if you pause and do something as simple as get out of the office and get out of the four rooms of your boardroom or of your building and begin to interact with, in some basic levels, with present and potential customers, it becomes a homing device and a centering device for you to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So it centers the business. It also is really interesting to me that I teach in a business school. I have a very creative background, and what excited me about that was the opportunity to integrate creativity and introduce more creative problem-solving methods in a business school education. And what's so interesting is that traditional business school curriculum has really erred on the side of explaining marketplace phenomena in the form of lines and boxes with arrows and charts and graphs. And even when I was completing my PhD studies and I had to do a literature review on academic business literature, there's a funny thing that happens where up until the early 1980s, it's almost as if scholarship forgot that markets are made up of human beings, and they're made up of people who are fallible and not predictable. And all of a sudden, in the 80s, you get to see research that acknowledges that and that accepts more qualitative research methods. So empathy is critical. It's really why we do what we do. It helps us to also just be more authentic, because consumers are pretty savvy and can sniff out when you're kind of just have a cookie cutter approach versus when you as a business have them specifically and particularly in mind.
That's true. I think a lot of the web has gotten customers to be far more savvy than they used to be. Their expectations, I think, right now are far higher on what you can do, the data you have available on them. Watching and experiencing customers come out and say things like, I know you have that.
Yeah.
And you might not, but they assume because everybody else does, or Amazon does it, right?
Right.
Yeah. And trying to understand where they're coming from. You're right with the authenticity. I love that. Cause you're right. They know,
Yeah.
They can see it a mile away. So how does this work with people applying this into their own businesses, and it's trying to, how could they infuse this, or what have you seen of how people infuse this into their companies slowly but surely?
Well, it's interesting. So Harvard Business Review dedicated their entire September 2015 issue to design thinking. And when you have an iconic institution such as Harvard Business School bless the field, that's awesome. And all of a sudden it started to really get recognition. But what was interesting is that the articles in that issue were dedicated to talking about, best case practices and examples of companies from a range of industries in healthcare and financial services and management consulting that have been integrating design thinking for quite some time. And when I say quite some time, I mean, at least 10 years, which is still a newbie. But so one of the articles pointed out that management consulting companies like McKinsey, for example, and Deloitte have actually acquired design strategy firms because they've realized that to meet the needs of their corporate clients, they need more than a SWOT analysis and more than bar charts and graphs to articulate the opportunity and define the insight. And they need a methodology that, is more human-centered. And companies like not Lincoln Financial. I'm sorry, just blanked out on the name of the bank in your hometown in Boston. Fidelity
Okay.
Bank has a very robust UX design research team. They also have a vice president of design thinking embedded in their organization. Wells Fargo has been doing quite a lot of work in design thinking for quite some time. In Philadelphia, Independence Blue Cross has a whole innovation hub and center that employs a lot of design thinking methods. So those are larger companies. And I think smaller companies actually are at an advantage to apply a lot of the principles of design thinking because they don't have as many bureaucratic hurdles to check off before you ask permission to go out into the field. And one of the things that a lot of companies have acknowledged happens when you integrate design thinking into your organization is that it does change the culture of the place. It changes the types of people who you want to hire, how you recruit, how you onboard. It changes even the way you budget because there's a very different timeline. It's a longer timeline in getting the insight. If you are doing a design thinking method, which really values problem framing and asking over and over again, did we even ask the right question before we go running down this rabbit hole and spending millions of dollars of investment? So there are some really interesting and cool examples out there of a range of businesses that have started to integrate design thinking.
Yeah, I like the you just brought up the whole, are you asking the right question?
Right.
And I think that's where I've seen in companies, you start going down that path and you realize maybe we're not solving the right problem.
Right.
And do you and do you see that as something that's common and where design thinking really helps build the bridge?
Oh, it's very common, but one of the things that design thinking hopes to accomplish is a culture where we value mistakes. And there are very few companies that are open to or willing to make that adjustment because we, in general, live in a culture and a society where it's very punitive around, mistakes that are made. It's not very forgiving. So to have um, uh, a culture that begins to value mistakes is pretty huge, and it means that you have a very different type of leadership that's going to be supportive of people who, you say, okay, let's call it an experiment, and one of the results of an experiment could be that it flopped, it failed, it didn't do so well. I'm sorry if I did I answer your question correctly?
Yeah, no. This is great. This is great because it's bringing up other questions that I have, because now I'm like, what are the leadership qualities that you see are necessary for a design thinking organization? And then because then the next part is going to be like, what types of like hires are better for, or what kind of team members are better for a design thinking. So I don't know how you want to answer that, but it's kind of like the makeup of a team.
Sure. Well, I'm a big fan of emergent leadership and an organization that embeds leadership throughout. And, so people who work on the margins and on the front lines, who are salespeople, where they're touching the customer every day, are extremely valuable for giving input. The more diverse the teams, the better. And I'd love it if more companies were open to diversify the types of titles and skill competencies that they hire for. So, what if more companies hired anthropologists, in a bank setting? For example, SAP is an example of a corporate firm, which also SAP and Hasenplatner are affiliated a lot with design thinking, but, they've hired anthropologists. And what if, kind of in the government, we had more design teams, and our federal government actually does have design teams embedded in Veterans Affairs, for example, and a design thinking service design team there. There's also a design thinking lab in the Office of Personnel Management in Washington, D.C. But what if that was much more prevalent on the municipal level and on the state level? So the more diverse the skill sets that you have on a team, what will arise is something called creative abrasion. And this is something that Jerry Hirschbaum, who was for a long time designer at Nissan Automotive Company, he was a big proponent of. He loved the stickiness that would happen when teams were made up of people who didn't all think the same. And sometimes there might be a disagreement, hopefully a respectful disagreement. So abrasion is something that we tend to shy away from because it means there's some friction. But if you think of friction in scientific terms, from level of physics, then friction is fundamentally energy. And so the more friction you have, actually the more energy you have, contributing to problem solving or an innovation process. So diversity on so many levels is really critical.
I haven't heard like the diverse thinking described that way. I love what you said about the friction, meaning that there's more energy to define the problem, and to define the problem in a better way. I haven't heard that before like that. I think it's awesome. That's awesome. And so you would then see a team with all these different roles, people with very, very different backgrounds coming together to solve a problem. Like, because I know most work environments today, everyone has because you're right, it's kind of homogenous in how they have their backgrounds, right? So if you're in banking, you've always been in banking. And if you're in, when they have consumer sites, they're always been in consumer sites, or you've always been in a B2B site. So you're saying, let's mix it up in a workplace environment.
Yes. Now, having said that, this is something that we learned at Philadelphia University, because we did a major redesign of our entire university, where we went from being a university consisting of 6 colleges to one consisting of 3 colleges. And our thinking was, we wanted to break down silos. We wanted to have much more integrative approaches. We wanted to walk the talk. And so I'm now part of the College of Design, Engineering, and Commerce, where we have a core curriculum, that integrates the learning of students majoring in a design discipline, an engineering discipline, and a business discipline. And they're also still taking their major specific classes. And the strategic design MBA program that I direct is a natural outgrowth of that. But one of the things that we learned very quickly is that it's one thing to say, yeah, diverse teams are good, but teaming is a phenomenon that you have to teach and that you have to practice, because teaming is not really natural. You have to share, you have to follow, right. You have to listen more, you have to know what your own strengths are. There's an acute level of self-awareness that has to happen in teaming, so that you know what you're not so great at and what you're really excellent in, and there has to be ways to share those competencies so that the team can optimize that depending on the need and the phase of the challenge that you're going through. So that's interesting, because it then means, say, for example, in an HR team, an HR department in an organization, that then becomes one of the things that you want to train for, and that you go in and out of different units within a company and help them with that. Because there will be friction, and there will be misunderstandings, and there will be turf warfare. So you
Right.
want to try to anticipate that as much as possible.
Interesting. And when you were mentioning about, it seems like the design thinking is, and you mentioned this in the beginning with like lean and all these other aspects, they're going to like flatten. It's like we have this trend in businesses to not be so siloed, to get people together. Yes, it causes friction. Everyone's really afraid of the friction, right? Because like you said, you got to manage the friction. And I don't think they train people really. It's kind of, you're thrown in and go do and learn how to be a team member. Because you were right. You also have to share
Right.
and listen. And that's not as,
yes.
I think, what is it? I was listening to a talk from Justin Treasure. He does a lot with listening. And that's one thing he says is we don't learn how to listen. It's amazing. Like we learn how to read, we learn how to write, we kind of learn how to present, but we definitely don't learn how to listen. Do you see this as like design thinking is like kind of, it seems like it's kind of spearheading a lot of this movement to a different way of working?
It is. It's a, as a couple of my students have said, it's a game changer. It's a paradigm shifter, because it behooves you to pay attention in a very different way. You just, it's kind of like if you've ever taken a drawing class. When you learn to draw, when you draw, you really learn to see in a very different way, because one of the first things you learn is like, contour drawing, and just really drawing the outer edges of, say, a group of trees. And then what you begin to see is what's revealed, let's say, in between the trunks of several trees or their branches, is what's called negative space. It's that in between bit, in between the leaves and the tree trunks, etc. So that in and of itself is pretty radical shift in how you see. And design thinking similarly is a lens, and it really shifts the way you realize there's a different way I could be asking this question. There's a different group of people I could be talking to or observing to understand how to better deliver this medication or sell these shoes or set up this school organization, whatever it is. So I really would say that fundamentally you're learning, you're putting on a new lens and learning a different way to see, which has a cascading effect on everything.
So if you could maybe share like a case study success story of a company that has gone through this shift of design thinking and what they've actually like materially achieved and things like that, if you have something like ready to go, or a couple of examples.
Yeah, well, there are several examples, and so I blog for Inc.com, and I'm going to be posting these over the next couple of months. But one, I just finished interviewing them. The Mayo Clinic out in Rochester, Minnesota, has, in its efforts to heal the healthcare system and offer a better way to address integrative medicine and healing and answering the needs of clinicians as well as patients and providers and all that, they have a service design team in place. And their service design team has a lot of great examples of how the method of inquiry, of focusing on the patient primarily, sometimes rather than the physician, really reveals so much in terms of a much better delivery system, whether it's healthcare, whether it's diabetes care or the wait time in an ER. I recently co-authored and published a very short article. It was really an interview with a physician at Nemours Children's Hospital in Delaware. There's a great journal called Touchpoint. It's the journal of the Service Design Network. And in the last issue, Paul Rosen and I published a very short piece on an intervention he designed with his team on administering needle shots to children, and the intervention was pets, and they had dogs around for the children to hold in their laps, or for the children just to pet and kind of take away their focus on their arm. And it was amazing how it shifted, even if everything from the parents' anxiety to the nurse practitioners' stress levels. So that's an example. I'm going to be talking to a division of, excuse me, I apologize, of Carnival Cruises. They have a new division called Fathom Cruise Lines. And Fathom Cruise Lines right now goes to the Dominican Republic and to Cuba. And they do a lot of service projects, and they actually implement a lot of design thinking, not only on board for the customer experience while you are touring and while you're relaxing, but in all of the pre-work. And they apparently have done a really good job of integrating design thinking into marketing and sales and operations and logistics. So those are two examples. I've already mentioned that Fidelity Bank has a design thinking practice underway. So those are some examples.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yeah, because I'm hoping, like, with people hearing this on the show, they can get inspired to go learn more about these stories and see what they could do. And I know we're starting to approach time, excuse me, but maybe, do you have like maybe 4 or 5 things people could do, like quick things, right? Quick hits, like low hanging fruit, to get design thinking or introduce it into their organization?
Yeah. One is to get out of the office. And I mean that really seriously. I mean, when you think about it, we spend so much time staring at, the paperwork in front of us, or staring at each other and talking to each other. But literally getting out of the office. When I worked in the fashion industry in global sourcing, we would do something on a regular basis which we called shop the market. And so, for example, when I worked in the Victoria's Secret account, I would shop the market and look at stores that were at similar price points for lingerie and kind of leisure wear. But I would also go to high-end lingerie boutiques on Madison Avenue, New York, and I'd look at catalog, I'd look at retail, I'd look at e-commerce, and I would get out of the myopic view of the way we were approaching the business and really shopping the market. And you can take that even further and talk to people. So getting out of the room is one way. A second way is start reading up on these things. So there's a lot of blogs out there. I blog about it. There's so many amazing books that are, if you just type in design thinking into Amazon, that will come up. I believe my book will come up as well, which I think is great, because I have the contributors to my book, Strategic Design Thinking, are both practitioners and academics. So you get a really robust context for how to use design thinking, why design thinking, how it relates to foresight and strategy and sustainability and branding, all that stuff. So starting to read more about it is really helpful. A third thing is to I was going to say, even mix up the way you work as a team, and to think about new people that you can invite in on a conversation, at your next team meeting, someone from a totally opposite part of your company that can ask the naive questions. A fourth thing is to hold a standing meeting and require people to doodle a takeaway from that meeting, or doodle a concept that they would like to introduce. So not using words, not using sentences, but we are hardwired to be visual thinkers. And in the Strategic Design MBA program, we're big proponents of show me, don't just tell me. So those are 4 quick ways I think that people can pretty quickly begin to practice design thinking.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Those are great takeaways. Thank you. I know we're at time. So Natalie, I just wanted to thank you so much for being on today. That was tremendous. This was awesome. I really enjoyed the conversation. This was great.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate the invitation. It was nice to speak with you about design thinking. Thank you.
Oh, this was so much fun. Especially because it's I do the user experience. So I'm like, oh, this is so awesome. So very excited. So just to close out, everyone, thank you for joining us. This will be up on iTunes in the podcast shortly. And otherwise, you can also find the show at InPowerCoaching.com. And again, thank you so much, Natalie. And hope you can come back and we can have another follow-up discussion. And have a great day.
Thank you for having me. I would love to do that. Have a great day. Bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.